Karen Pritchard wasn't just a resident of Oakwood Estates, she was its self-appointed dictator. At 52, she ruled the cul-de-sacs of this tidy Raleigh suburb with an iron grip, her title as HOA president worn like a crown. Her house, a beige McMansion with faux shutters and a perpetually weed-free lawn, sat at the corner of Magnolia Lane, where she could survey her domain like a hawk from her wraparound porch. Every blade of grass, every mailbox height, every parked car was subject to her scrutiny, and God help you if you crossed her invisible lines. She'd once fined a neighbor $200 for planting petunias instead of marigolds, claiming it disrupted the aesthetic continuity. Karen didn't just live in Oakwood Estates, she was Oakwood Estates. Her life was a symphony of routine, conducted with militaristic precision. Mornings kicked off with a jog around the neighborhood, less for exercise, more to snoop, her blonde bob bouncing under a neon visor, her Fitbit tracking every judgmental step. She'd stop by the Starbucks on Elm Street for a skinny vanilla latte, snapping at the barista if the cup wasn't filled to the exact line she deemed acceptable. By 9, she'd be at her desk in her home office, drafting HOA newsletters with titles like Reminder, Trash Cans Are Not Art Installations, or fielding complaints about kids' bikes left on driveways. Afternoons meant grocery runs to Trader Joe's, where she'd lecture the staff about stocking more gluten-free quinoa, and evenings were for sipping Pinot Grigio while scrolling the Ring app, ready to pounce on any suspicious activity. Karen's look was as polished as her power trips. Her hair, dyed a brassy blonde, was cut into a razor-sharp bob that framed her angular face like a helmet. She favored pastel blazers, pink, mint, lavender, paired with white pants that never dared show a wrinkle. Her accessories screamed money: chunky pearl necklaces, diamond studs, a Louis Vuitton tote she'd bought after her divorce settlement. Her voice, though, was her real weapon, a high-pitched nasal twang that could pierce eardrums at 50 yards. When she spoke, it wasn't conversation. It was a decree, and she spoke a lot. Oakwood Estates was picture-perfect on the surface. Rows of identical houses, emerald lawns, and a community pool that sparkled like a postcard. But beneath the HOA's iron rule, it was a pressure cooker of petty feuds. The Wilsons hated the Garcias for their tacky Christmas lights. Mrs. Delaney grumbled about Mr. Patel's curry smells wafting over the fence. And everyone dreaded Karen. She wasn't just nosy, she was a one-woman surveillance state. She'd once called a special meeting to ban wind chimes after deeming them a sonic assault. Most residents complied because fighting Karen was like wrestling a tornado, exhausting and pointless. But not everyone bent the knee. Across the street from Karen lived Tom Carver, a grizzled 60-year-old widower and retired Marine. Tom had moved to Oakwood Estates 3 years ago after his wife, Linda, passed from cancer. He kept to himself, tending his roses and flying an American flag from his porch. His house was modest, white siding, a single garage. But it had character: a weathered rocking chair, a birdhouse he'd built himself, a small plaque by the door that read, Semper Fi. Tom wasn't loud or flashy, but he had a quiet strength that unnerved Karen. He didn't attend HOA meetings, didn't sign her petitions, and once told her to shove it when she complained about his truck's oil stain in the driveway. She'd hated him ever since. Tom wasn't alone in his defiance. The neighborhood had its share of quiet rebels. Mrs. Nguyen, who snuck extra gnomes into her garden despite the no-kitsch rule. Jake, the teenage skateboarder who ignored Karen's glares. And the honor guard from VFW Post 47, who'd started practicing in the community park a block away. The guard was a small crew, 5 or 6 vets, mostly older guys with creaky knees and steady hands. They'd gather every fall to rehearse for Veterans Day, their trumpets and rifles a tribute to the fallen. The park wasn't technically Oakwood property, but it was close enough for Karen to claim jurisdiction. She'd grumbled about them before, too much racket. But this year, with the holiday approaching, they were out there more often, and her patience was wearing thin. It was mid-October when the trouble started. The leaves were turning gold and crimson, the air crisp enough for scarves but warm enough for open windows. Karen was on her porch one Saturday, sipping her wine and scrolling next door, when she heard it, a faint, mournful trumpet note drifting over the rooftops. She froze, glass halfway to her lips, and listened. Another note followed, then a third. slow, deliberate, haunting. It was taps, played with the kind of reverence that could hush a crowd. To most people, it was beautiful. To Karen, it was an invasion. She set her glass down with a clink and stood, hands on hips, peering toward the park. She couldn't see the guard from her porch. The trees blocked her view, but she could hear them, and that was enough. "Rowdy noise," she muttered, her lips curling into a scowl. "Who do they think they are, turning this place into a circus?" She grabbed her phone and fired off a post to the Oakwood Estates Facebook group. "Unacceptable noise disturbance near the park. HOA rules clearly state quiet hours. Who's with me to shut this down?" Within minutes, the likes trickled in, her usual sycophants, the ones who'd nod at anything she said. But a few comments popped up too. "Sounds like music to me, Karen." And "Pretty sure that's not HOA land." She ignored them. Dissent was just noise of a different kind. The next day she marched to the park, her pink blazer blazing like a warning flare. The honor guard was there, Tom among them, holding a rifle for the salute, his face set in concentration. There was Ed, a wiry Vietnam vet with a silver trumpet, Bill, who'd lost a leg in Desert Storm and leaned on a cane, and a couple others, all in faded VFW caps. They were mid-rehearsal, Ed's taps echoing through the trees, when Karen stormed up. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice slicing through the melody like a buzzsaw. The trumpet faltered, and the men turned, startled. "What do you think you're doing? This noise is outrageous. People live here, you know. Decent people who don't need this racket." Tom lowered his rifle, his gray eyes narrowing. "We're practicing for Veterans Day, ma'am. Honoring the dead. You got a problem with that?" Karen bristled, her hands flying to her hips. "I've got a problem with you disrupting my peace. This is a residential area, not a parade ground. Take your little band somewhere else." Ed stepped forward, wiping his trumpet mouthpiece with a cloth. "Lady, we've been doing this for years. Park's public property. You don't own it." "I'm the HOA president," she snapped, as if that settled it. "I speak for this community, and we don't want this rowdy noise ruining our quality of life. I'll call the city if I have to." Bill chuckled, leaning on his cane. "Rowdy, it's taps, not a rock concert. Maybe you ought to listen closer." Karen's face flushed red beneath her foundation. "Don't you dare talk back to me. I'll have you all cited for disturbing the peace." She spun on her heel and stormed off, leaving the men staring after her. Tom shook his head, muttering, "Some people got no respect," before they picked up where they'd left off. That was just the beginning. Karen didn't let it go. She never did. Over the next week, she escalated. She called the city, claiming vagrants were harassing residents with unpermitted noise. She posted daily rants online, rallying her HOA loyalists. She even taped a no trespassing sign to a park bench, as if she could annex it by sheer willpower. The guard kept practicing, unfazed, but the neighborhood started picking sides. Some backed Karen, annoyed by the faint trumpet echoes. Others, Tom's quiet allies, saw her for what she was, a bully with a clipboard. Karen thought she was winning. She always did. But she didn't know the storm she'd kicked up, or the reckoning waiting just around the corner. Karen Pritchard wasn't the type to let a slight go unanswered. That Sunday showdown in the park with the honor guard lit a fire under her, and she spent the next week turning her annoyance into a full-blown crusade. By Monday morning, she was already on the phone with the city's noise ordinance office, her voice shrill enough to rattle the receiver. "I'm telling you, it's a disturbance," she insisted to a board clerk named Cheryl, who'd heard this kind of call 100 times. "Trumpets blaring at all hours, rifles clacking. It's like living next to a war zone." Cheryl mumbled something about checking the rules and hung up, but Karen took it as a victory. She strutted back to her office, fired up her laptop, and drafted an email to the HOA board. Emergency meeting Wednesday night. Agenda, noise nuisance action plan. The neighborhood buzzed with the fallout. Karen's Facebook post from Saturday had ballooned. 47 likes, 19 comments, and a handful of shares. Her loyalists, like Susan from 2 streets over, who once reported a kid for flying a kite too close to power lines, chimed in with, "Amen, Karen, and we need peace and quiet." But the dissenters were louder this time. Jake's mom, Lisa, a single nurse who'd lived in Oakwood for a decade, wrote, "It's literally taps for veterans. Chill out." Tom Carver didn't comment. He didn't do social media. But he saw the post when Mrs. Nguyen showed it to him over the fence. She's lost her damn mind, he grunted, pruning his roses with a little more force than necessary. Karen didn't care about the pushback. She thrived on it. By Tuesday, she'd printed flyers, bright yellow with bold red text screaming, "Stop the noise!" and stuffed them into every mailbox in Oakwood Estates. She even taped one to Tom's front door, a petty jab she knew he'd hate. When he found it, he crumpled it into a ball and tossed it into his compost pile, muttering, "She's picking the wrong fight." The honor guard, meanwhile, kept practicing. Every afternoon, like clockwork, their mournful notes floated over the treetops, a quiet defiance that drove Karen up the wall. Wednesday's HOA meeting was a circus before it even started. The community center, a squat brick building with fluorescent lights and folding chairs, was packed, standing room only. Karen had rallied her troops: Susan, a pinched-faced woman in a floral scarf; Gary, a retired accountant who nodded at everything she said; and half a dozen others who'd bought into her quality-of-life spiel. But the rebels showed up too. Lisa, Mrs. Nguyen, a young couple named Matt and Priya who just moved in, and to everyone's surprise, Tom Carver, leaning against the back wall in his faded marine jacket, arms crossed. Karen took the podium like a general addressing her army, gavel in hand. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We're here because our neighborhood, our sanctuary, is under attack. This so-called honor guard thinks they can turn our streets into a marching band practice zone, and I say enough is enough." She slammed the gavel for emphasis, earning murmurs of approval from her clique. "I've spoken to the city, and I'm prepared to escalate this to a formal complaint. Who's with me?" Susan raised her hand first. "I can't even hear my TV over that racket," she whined, though she lived 3 blocks from the park. Gary chimed in, "It's disrespectful to our property values." Karen beamed, soaking it up. But then Lisa stood, her scrubs wrinkled from a double shift, and the room hushed. "Karen, with all due respect, you're blowing this out of proportion," Lisa said, her tone calm but firm. "They're practicing for Veterans Day, 1 day a year, to honor people who died for us. My dad was a vet. I think it's beautiful." Karen's smile tightened into a grimace. "Well, Lisa, not everyone finds it beautiful. Some of us value peace and quiet over sentimental nonsense." "It's not nonsense," Matt cut in, his voice sharp. He and Priya had a toddler, and he looked exhausted. "It's 15 minutes a day, tops. You're acting like they're throwing raves out there." The room erupted, half cheering Matt, half muttering support for Karen. She banged the gavel again, her face flushing. "Order! This isn't a debate club. We're voting on a petition to ban them from the park." That's when Tom spoke up, his gravelly voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You can't ban them. Park's not HOA turf. And those men you're whining about? They've got more honor in their pinkies than you've got in your whole damn body." He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The weight of it landed hard. Karen spun toward him, eyes blazing. "How dare you, Tom Carver? You don't get to lecture me. I run this neighborhood." "You run your mouth," he shot back, and a ripple of gas swept the room. Mrs. Nguyen stifled a laugh, hiding it behind her hand. Karen clutched the podium, trembling with rage. "This meeting is adjourned," she snapped, storming out as the crowd buzzed. Her loyalists trailed her, but the tide was shifting. People lingered, whispering, some annoyed, some amused, some outright angry. Tom stayed put, watching her go, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. The next day, Karen doubled down. She called the police, claiming the guard was trespassing and harassing residents. 2 officers, Ramirez and a rookie named Jenna, showed up at the park mid-rehearsal. Ed was on his trumpet, Bill drilling the salute with his cane propped nearby, when Ramirez approached. "Got a complaint about noise," he said, sounding half apologetic. "Mind keeping it down?" Tom stepped forward, rifle still in hand from the drill. "We're on public land, officer. Got every right to be here. Tell whoever called to shove it." Ramirez sighed. He knew Tom from the VFW barbecues. "Yeah, figured. Just had to check. Carry on." He tipped his hat and left, Jenna trailing behind, confused. Karen, watching from her car across the street, fumed. She snapped a photo of the cops leaving and posted it online. "Police refuse to act. Time for real action." By Friday, she'd roped in a lawyer friend, Dan, a slick guy in a cheap suit who'd handled her divorce. Over coffee at Mabel's diner, she laid out her plan. "I want an injunction," she said, stabbing her fork into a kale salad. "They can't keep doing this. It's psychological warfare." Dan raised an eyebrow, sipping his black coffee. "Karen, it's a public park. You've got no standing. And they're vets. Judge will laugh you out of court." "Then I'll make it personal," she hissed. "I'll find out who's behind this and ruin them." That who was Tom, and Karen zeroed in on him like a missile. She started digging, pestering neighbors, checking county records, even staking out his house from her porch with binoculars. She found out he'd been widowed, that he'd served in the Gulf War, that he paid his taxes late once in 2018. "Aha," she crowed to Susan over the phone. "He's a deadbeat. I'll use that." Susan, ever the yes woman, egged her on. Meanwhile, the honor guard kept at it, their rehearsals growing sharper as November 11th neared. Word spread beyond Oakwood. Local news caught wind of the HOA versus Vets spat, and a reporter named Claire from the Raleigh Times called Karen for comment. "It's about respect," Karen lied smoothly, perched on her couch in a lavender blazer. "Respect for our community's peace." Claire's article ran Saturday titled, "Suburban Standoff, HOA Leader Targets Veterans Tribute," with a photo of Karen glaring next to one of Ed playing taps. The comments online were brutal. "Entitled much? Leave the vets alone, lady." Karen ignored them, framing it as persecution. Tom, though, wasn't idle. He rallied the guard, Ed, Bill, and the rest, and they decided to push back. "She wants a fight? She'll get one," Tom said at the VFW hall, nursing a beer. They planned a public rehearsal the next weekend, inviting the whole town. Flyers went up, not Karen's garish yellow, but simple white sheets with "Honor Our Vets, Join Us November 7th" in bold black. Lisa helped spread the word, Jake plastered them on telephone poles, and Mrs. Nguyen baked cookies for the event. Oakwood split further, Karen's camp versus Tom's. The Saturday rehearsal was a powder keg. Hundreds showed up, vets, families, even Mabel from the diner with a tray of biscuits. The guard performed flawlessly, taps ringing out under a blazing orange sunset. Karen arrived late, flanked by Susan and Gary, and lost it. "This is a disgrace," she shrieked, shoving through the crowd. "I'll have you all arrested." She dialed 911 right there, screaming about an illegal gathering as the crowd booed. Police rolled up, Ramirez again with Jenna, and Karen pointed triumphantly. But Tom stepped forward, calm as ever, and handed Ramirez a permit. "Filed it yesterday," he said. "All legal." Ramirez grinned, tipped his hat again, and drove off. Karen's jaw dropped, the crowd cheered, and someone, Jake probably, yelled, "Sit down, Karen!" She stormed off, vowing revenge. That night, she plotted. She'd lost the park battle, but she'd hit Tom where it hurt, his home, his reputation. She filed a slew of HOA complaints against him. Truck violations, untrimmed hedges, unsightly flagpole. She even spread a rumor he was a drunk, whispering it to Susan loud enough for the grapevine to catch it. By Monday, Oakwood was a war zone, half defending Tom, half clutching pearls with Karen. The conflict was personal now, and Veterans Day was a week away. Karen thought she had the upper hand. She didn't see the storm brewing, or the trap she'd walked into. The week before Veterans Day turned Oakwood Estates into a battlefield, and Karen Pritchard was the general of her own sinking ship. After the public rehearsal fiasco, she'd retreated to her beige fortress on Magnolia Lane. But she wasn't licking her wounds. She was loading her cannons. By Sunday night, her office was a war room, HOA rulebooks stacked like sandbags, her laptop glowing with half-drafted emails, and a legal pad scrawled with battle plans. She'd lost the park, sure, but she'd make Tom Carver pay. If she couldn't stop the honor guard, she'd bury him under her own brand of suburban justice. "He'll regret crossing me," she muttered, sipping her third Pinot Grigio of the night, her manicured nails tapping the glass. Monday morning, she unleashed hell. She filed 6 HOA violations against Tom in one go. Everything from excessive yard debris, a single leaf pile, to unapproved flagpole height. It was an inch over the limit. She emailed the board, demanding an immediate hearing, and tacked violation notices to Tom's door herself, her pink blazer a blur as she marched across the street. By noon, she'd called her lawyer buddy Dan again, begging him to find a loophole. "He's mocking me, Dan," she shrieked over the phone. "I want him fined, evicted, something." Dan sighed. "Karen, you're reaching. This is personal now. Courts won't touch it." She hung up on him, undeterred. Tom found the notices when he got home from the VFW, his truck rumbling into the driveway. He ripped them off his door, scanned the laundry list of complaints, and let out a dry laugh. "She's unhinged," he said to himself, tossing them onto his kitchen counter next to a stack of unopened bills. He wasn't worried. Not yet. He'd dealt with worse than Karen in the Gulf War. But he knew she wouldn't stop, so he called Ed and Bill that night. "She's coming for me," he told them over beers at the VFW hall. "Might need backup." Ed grinned, twirling his trumpet mouthpiece. "Let her try. We've got the town on our side." Karen didn't see it that way. She saw traitors everywhere. Tuesday, she caught Lisa chatting with Mrs. Nguyen over the fence. Both laughing, both holding flyers for the Veterans Day ceremony. "Turncoats," Karen hissed from her porch, binoculars pressed to her face. She posted another rant online. "Some residents care more about noise than community standards." Sad. The comments were a bloodbath. Half her loyalists cheering, half the rebels tearing her apart. "You're the sad one, Karen," Jake's mom replied, and Priya added, "This is why we're moving next year." Karen blocked them both, her fingers trembling with rage. By Wednesday, the neighborhood was a pressure cooker. Karen's flyers, now neon orange with "Enforce the rules," in bold, littered mailboxes again, but people weren't just grumbling. They were fighting back. Matt and Priya taped a "Support Our Vets" sign to their garage, big enough to be seen from Karen's porch. Mrs. Nguyen planted a tiny American flag in her gnome garden, a silent jab. Jake and his buddies skateboarded past Karen's house, blasting Sweet Caroline from a boombox, knowing she'd hate it. She called the cops, Ramirez and Jenna again, who rolled up, listened to her screech about delinquents, and left with a shrug. "Kids being kids," Ramirez said, smirking as he drove off. Karen's breaking point came Thursday. She'd spent the morning at Starbucks ranting to Susan about disloyal neighbors when she overheard Mabel from the diner at the next table. "Tom's got the whole VFW coming Sunday," Mabel said to a friend, her voice warm with pride. "Biggest Veterans Day yet. Gonna be beautiful." Karen's latte cup hit the table hard enough to splash foam. "Beautiful?" she snapped, loud enough for the room to hear. "It's a disgrace. That man's a menace." Mabel turned, her apron dusted with flour, and fixed Karen with a look that could curdle milk. "Honey, the only menace here is you. Sit down and drink your coffee." The baristas snickered, and Karen stormed out, vowing to boycott Mabel's forever. That afternoon, she escalated to scorched earth tactics. She dug up an old HOA bylaw, buried on page 47 of the handbook, about public disturbances originating from resident properties. Her logic was twisted but relentless. Tom was in the honor guard. The guard practiced near Oakwood, ergo Tom was liable. She drafted a cease and desist letter claiming his involvement violated HOA rules and had Susan hand-deliver it to his mailbox. "He'll cave," she told Gary over the phone, pacing her living room. "No one defies me this long." Tom didn't cave. He read the letter, laughed harder than he had in years, and taped it to his fridge with a magnet shaped like a grenade. Then he called Claire from the Raleigh Times. "Got a story for you," he said, leaning back in his rocking chair. "HOA Prez is trying to sue me for honoring vets." Claire was at his house in an hour, notebook in hand, and by Friday morning the headline hit, "Veteran Faces HOA Wrath Over Memorial Plans." The article quoted Tom, "I fought for this country, now I'm fighting for my roses," and painted Karen as a petty tyrant. Social media exploded. "Just Leave Tom Alone" trended locally, and strangers started mailing Tom cards of support. Karen saw the article at 7 a.m., her phone buzzing with notifications. She screamed so loud her cat Muffin bolted under the couch. "Lies!" she yelled, hurling the phone onto a cushion. She called the paper, demanding a retraction, but Claire politely told her to pound sand. "It's all sourced, ma'am," she said, hanging up as Karen sputtered. By noon, her Facebook was a war zone. Hate messages from vets' families, memes of her face on a dictator's body, even a few death threats she reported to the cops. Ramirez took the call, barely hiding his amusement. We'll look into it, he said, knowing full well they wouldn't. Friday night, she held an emergency HOA rally at her house, her last stand before Veterans Day. The living room was packed with her diehards, Susan, Gary, a few others clutching wine glasses and nodding like bobbleheads. "We're under siege," Karen declared, pacing in a mint green blazer, her voice shaking. "Tom Carver's turned this into a personal vendetta, and I won't stand for it. Tomorrow we confront them, all of us at their so-called rehearsal. We'll show them who runs this neighborhood." Susan clapped. Gary mumbled agreement, but the energy was off. Even her loyalists looked tired, their eyes darting to the door. Saturday dawned bright and cold, the sky a crisp blue streaked with gold clouds. The Honor Guard's final rehearsal was set for 3 p.m., and Tom had pulled out all the stops. The VFW brought extra hands, 20 vets total, from grizzled Vietnam guys to younger Iraq War survivors. They'd roped off the park with American flags, set up folding chairs, and even got a permit for a small PA system. Mabel brought biscuits, Lisa hauled a cooler of lemonade, and Jake's crew handed out programs printed on Tom's ancient inkjet. Veterans Day Preview, Honor Through Music. By 2:30, the crowd was huge, hundreds spilling onto the grass, kids waving tiny flags, old-timers saluting from wheelchairs. Karen arrived at 2:55, her posse in tow, Susan clutching a clipboard, Gary wheezing from the walk. She'd dressed for war, a hot pink blazer, white scarf, heels sinking into the turf. She shoved through the crowd, ignoring the glares, and planted herself front and center as Ed raised his trumpet. "Stop this right now," she bellowed, her voice cutting through the chatter. "You're in violation of HOA authority. I demand you disperse." The crowd turned, a sea of stunned faces. Tom stepped forward, rifle slung over his shoulder, his expression stone cold. "Lady, you're on public land. You've got no authority here. Sit down or leave." "I will not," she screeched, waving her cease and desist letter like a flag. "You're a disgrace, Tom Carver. A drunk, a slob, a—" She didn't finish. Ed blew the first note of taps, sharp and clear, drowning her out. The crowd hushed, heads bowing, hands over hearts. Karen kept yelling, "This is outrageous. I'll sue you all." But the music swallowed her. Bill snapped a salute, his cane trembling but steady. The rifles cracked in unison, a 21-gun echo rolling over the park. It was flawless, reverent, unbreakable. Karen's voice faded into a shrill buzz, ignored by all. She lunged forward, shoving at Ed mid-note. He stumbled, the trumpet squeaking, and the crowd gasped. Tom caught her arm, not hard, just firm, and pulled her back. "That's enough," he growled, his eyes boring into hers. "You're done." "Let go of me," she screamed, wrenching free, her scarf falling to the dirt. Susan tried to pull her away, but Karen shook her off, spinning to face the crowd. "You're all traitors. You'll regret this." She stormed off, tripping over a flagpole rope, her heels snapping as she went. The crowd parted, some laughing, some jeering, most just staring in disbelief. The guard finished taps, the final note hanging in the air like a prayer. Then the applause hit, thunderous, shaking the trees. Tom nodded to Ed, who wiped his eyes with a sleeve. Mabel hugged Bill, Lisa high-fived Jake, and the town turned its back on Karen's retreating figure. She'd lost, not just the fight, but the war. Back home, she locked herself in, blinds drawn, phone off. The article, the booze, the snapped heel, it replayed in her head, a nightmare loop. She'd hit her peak, and it had crumbled. But Veterans Day was still coming, and Oakwood wasn't done with her yet. The morning after Karen's park meltdown, Oakwood Estates woke to a quiet Sunday, a stillness that felt like the calm after a hurricane. The air was sharp with November chill, the leaves a carpet of gold and red, and the neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Karen's house sat dark, blinds shut tight, her usual porch vigil abandoned. Inside, she was a wreck. She'd stayed up half the night, pacing in her slippers, replaying the booze, the snapped heel, Tom's iron grip on her arm. Her phone, still off, spared her the flood of notifications, texts, tags, voicemails that had piled up since she'd fled. Muffin, her cat, watched warily from the couch, sensing the storm hadn't fully passed. Across the street, Tom Carver sipped coffee in his rocking chair, the crumpled HOA notices still on his counter. He didn't gloat. He wasn't the type. But there was a glint in his gray eyes, a quiet satisfaction. The Honor Guard's rehearsal had been a triumph, and Veterans Day was tomorrow. The town was ready, and Karen's tantrum had only made it sweeter. He'd heard from Ed that morning. The VFW had doubled the chairs, expecting a record crowd. "She handed us a win," Ed had chuckled over the phone. Tom just nodded, sipping his brew, the American flag snapping in the breeze above him. By noon, the neighborhood grapevine was humming. Lisa dropped by Mrs. Nguyen's with coffee, recounting the park scene with wide-eyed glee. "She shoved Ed, and Tom just shut her down," Lisa said, laughing. Mrs. Nguyen grinned, plucking a dead leaf from her gnome garden. "Good for him. She's been asking for it." Down the block, Jake and his buddies reenacted Karen's trip over the rope, complete with exaggerated shrieks, while Matt and Priya taped a second "Support Our Vets" sign to their mailbox, just to twist the knife. Even Susan, Karen's staunchest ally, was quiet. Rumor had it she'd slipped out of Karen's house last night looking shell-shocked. Karen emerged at 2 p.m., puffy-eyed but defiant, her mint green blazer swapped for a gray sweatshirt. She needed air, needed to reclaim her turf. She grabbed her Fitbit and started her jog, avoiding eye contact with the neighbors peering from windows. But the signs were everywhere. Flags in yards, Veterans Day tomorrow, flyers on poles, a kid waving a sparkler shaped like a star. It was a silent rebuke, a town united against her. She gritted her teeth and powered on, her sneakers slapping the pavement, until she rounded the corner and saw it. A news van parked near the community center, Claire from the Raleigh Times interviewing Mabel under a banner that read, "Oakwood honors our heroes." Karen froze, her breath catching. Claire spotted her, waved her recorder, and called, "Ms. Pritchard, care to comment on yesterday?" Karen spun and bolted, her jog turning into a sprint, the van's engine rumbling behind her like a predator. She made it home, slammed the door, and sank onto her couch, chest heaving. "They're all against me," she whispered, clutching a throw pillow. For the first time, doubt crept in. Not enough to break her, but enough to sting. Veterans Day dawned bright and cold, the sky a flawless blue. The park was transformed. Rows of chairs, a small stage draped in red, white, and blue bunting, and a flagpole gleaming in the sun. By 10 a.m., it was packed. Hundreds of people, from Oakwood and beyond, spilling onto the grass. VFW vets in crisp caps mingled with families, kids clutching balloons, old-timers in wheelchairs saluting the flag. Mabel's diner crew handed out coffee and biscuits. Lisa and Priya poured lemonade, and Jake's gang passed programs. The honor guard stood ready. Tom, Ed, Bill, and the rest, rifles polished, trumpets glinting, faces set with pride. Karen watched from her porch, binoculars trembling in her hands. She'd planned to stay in, to boycott the circus, but curiosity and spite drew her out. She couldn't hear the speeches, but she saw the crowd, the flags, the smiles. At 11 a.m., the ceremony began. A local pastor gave a prayer, a Girl Scout troop sang "America the Beautiful," and then Tom stepped to the mic. His voice carried, steady and low, even to Karen's perch. "We're here to honor the fallen," he said. "Men and women who gave everything. This is for them, not for politics, not for noise complaints, just for them." The crowd applauded, a wave of sound that hit Karen like a slap. Then Ed raised his trumpet, and taps began. Slow, haunting, perfect. The rifles cracked in salute, 21 shots echoing over the rooftops. People stood, hands over hearts, tears streaking faces. Karen's binoculars slipped, her throat tightening despite herself. She'd heard it 100 times that fall, hated every note, but now, framed by the crowd's silence, it hit different. She shook it off, muttering, "Sentimental garbage." But her voice lacked its usual bite. The ceremony ended with cheers, hugs, and a potluck. Tables groaning with casseroles, pies, and Mabel's famous biscuits. Tom shook hands, Ed swapped stories. Bill leaned on his cane, grinning. The news van rolled tape, Claire's story already taking shape. Oakwood's Veterans Day triumph. Karen watched it all, her porch a lonely island, until Susan texted, "You should have come. It was beautiful." Karen didn't reply. She tossed the phone aside and went inside, the blinds snapping shut. Tuesday, the reckoning landed. The HOA board, spooked by the backlash, called an emergency meeting without Karen's input. Gary, Susan, and the rest met at the community center, the air thick with tension. Lisa and Matt showed up too, uninvited but insistent. "She's out of control," Lisa said, arms crossed. "Shoving Ed? Threatening Tom? We're done." Matt nodded. "Half the neighborhood's ready to sue her for harassment." Susan, pale and fidgety, stayed quiet. Her loyalty cracked. Gary, ever the weasel, suggested a vote. Should Karen step down as president? It passed 5-2, with Susan abstaining. By nightfall, an email went out. Effective immediately, Karen Pritchard is relieved of her duties. New elections TBD. Karen got the email at 8 p.m., her glass of Pinot halfway to her lips. She read it twice, then hurled the glass at the wall, red wine splattering like blood. "Traitors!" she screamed, muffin bolting again. She called Susan, who didn't pick up, then Gary, who stammered, "It's for the best, Karen," before hanging up. She was alone, dethroned, her empire in ashes. Wednesday, the Raleigh Times ran Claire's story. Veterans Day, victory overshadows HOA drama. It praised Tom, the guard, the town, and buried Karen in a single paragraph. Local HOA leaders' protests backfired, costing her position and credibility. The online comments were merciless, vets calling her a disgrace, neighbors spilling years of grudges. A petition circulated to dissolve the HOA entirely, already at 200 signatures. Karen's phone stayed off, but the mailbox overflowed with hate mail, including a note from Jake. "Karma's loud, huh?" Thursday, Tom knocked on her door. She almost didn't answer, peering through the peephole at his weathered face, but curiosity won. She opened it a crack, sweatshirt rumpled, no makeup. "What do you want?" she snapped. Tom held out a small flag, the kind they'd handed out at the ceremony. "Thought you might want one," he said, no trace of smugness. "It's over, Karen. Let it go." She stared, her mouth opening, then closing. She took the flag, the door clicking shut without a word. Tom walked back, his limp more pronounced in the cold, and didn't look back. By Friday, Oakwood exhaled. The signs came down, the flyers faded, but the flag stayed, tiny symbols of a shift. Karen didn't jog, didn't post, didn't call meetings. She stayed inside, the flag on her counter next to the HOA notices she'd never file. Susan stopped by Saturday, offering coffee in a week. "We'll figure it out," but Karen waved her off. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice hollow. Weeks later at Thanksgiving, Lisa hosted a block party. Potluck style, no HOA rules. Tom brought his roses, Mrs. Nguyen her cookies, Mabel her biscuits. Karen didn't come, but her blinds twitched, watching the laughter, the warmth. She poured a Pinot, sat alone, and for the first time didn't type a rant. The neighborhood moved on, healed, while Karen sat with her silence, her throne toppled, her lesson learned the hard way.